Hey, brothers, we want to give a warm welcome to Narco Dogs. Saludos para todos. Bienvenido, hermano Jim DeGenis. I know I'm killing your name, brother. I apologize. Watching us, he has one of the best channels, Batman, watching us all the way from Thailand. We love you, brother. Thank you for always being with us. I know it's 5 a.m, but you're always there by our side, brother. Never leave a brother behind. Lupe, watching us once again, brother. Bienvenido. Ceci Escano, bienvenida, hermana. Christopher Kilby, the legend from San Diego PD, Team 4 legend. He's 97. And Big Juan is working right now. Greetings, brothers, from Long Beach. Blessing to all. And Mr. Oldies, stick around, Mr. Oldies. I'm going to talk about you right now. Welcome, guys, and we'll talk a little bit more about Mr. Oldies. Welcome to the show. Guys, how's everything going? I'm excited about today's show. It's going to be outstanding. Chalo, ¿cómo estamos? We can't hear now. He's always laughing.
There you go. No, Benny. Hey, Benny. So you could a cool video, but you couldn't find any Asian cholo music. Asian oldies. Yeah, because you always have a good, really good tune for the, for the upcoming show. So I guess we're gonna have to find some, Asian oldies or something like that.
What was that one? Karate? Remember the one, the Karate Man or something?
Kung Fu Fighting.
Kung Fu Fighting. That would have been
David, I told you, Pinche Chalo's gonna come out with some mamada.
Hey, for the guy that had the first K9 unit in Calexico's history, bro.
That was a good story.
Yeah.
For those of you that before the show we were talking about who was uglier between all of us, and I think I probably took the cake on that one. But the one that threw himself down was Chalo, saying that he was the first K9 unit with a K9 picture on the police car, but it was actually his picture. Everybody thought it was a dog's picture, but he never had a dog. Oh, por feo, cabrón.
Está por feo. Parecía un pueblo sin gente también, tan feo que estaba.
Exactly. Hey guys, listen, I'm excited. Benny, I'm going to hand it over to you. But before I do, guys, we want to honor a legend. And a legend that is no longer with us. Today, we want to say rest in peace to our brother in arms and our brother in Christ. Scott Busboom passed away on March 13th, 2024. Scott served the Nebraska Department of Corrections for 35 years. He worked his way up to becoming a deputy warden. He died unexpectedly on March 13th. Brother, we love you. We thank you for your service. And you know what? We will see you in heaven someday. Someday, hopefully soon. We will see you in heaven, without a doubt. Rest in peace, brother. Thank you for your service. And you're a legend in our eyes and in the lives of the community and in the eyes of the men and women that had the privilege and honor to work hand in hand with you. We love you, brother. Rest in peace. With that said, guys, one last thing. If you love oldies as much as we do, and I'm telling you, Chalo loves oldies, Sean loves oldies, and I didn't know, but Benny's been listening to Mr. Oldies before I did. Guys, subscribe to Mr. Oldies' YouTube channel. It's probably since Art LeBeau died and Wolfman Jack, he's the new Wolfman Jack. He's the new Art LeBeau. I'm telling you, every Sunday you could actually not call in, but type in your song. You could dedicate it to your wife, to your girlfriend, to your mother, to whomever you want to dedicate it to, and he calls it out by name. But if you love oldies as much as I do, sometimes he comes on a little late, so I'll watch it the next day. I'll put it on while I'm working out. Well, I'll go out there the next day and smoke a cigar, and I'm listening to Mr. Oldies. So please, guys, subscribe to Mr. Oldies' channel. It's probably one of the best, him and Pomona Soul, that have the best oldies. But man, please, it's a great show. Truly appreciate it, guys, and we appreciate you too, Mr. Oldies. With that said, Benny, it's all on you now, brother.
You know what, David? I want to give it's not a shout out, but we hope for a speedy recovery for Sergio Kamacho.
Yes, I just heard about that. Yes,
he's a retired City of Bell police lieutenant who retired years ago. He was involved in a head-on collision with an 18-wheeler with a SMI. He survived, but now he's home and he's recovering. So, Sergio, we wish you the best and quick recovery, brother. And hopefully I'll get to see you pretty soon. I'll stop by your home and visit.
Yeah.
Wow.
Prayers for Sergio. Great guy. Outstanding. Good brother. With that, it's all yours, Benny.
Okay, let me see right here. Let me bring this up real quick. So today's guest tonight is retired San Diego Police Detective Sergeant Doug Collier. After leaving San Diego PD, Doug went to the Riverside County District Attorney as a senior investigator. Tonight, Doug will talk about two Southeast Asian gangs that moved into the Southwest Riverside County area from San Diego County. As we said before, gangs have no boundaries. They just go everywhere. The San Diego-based Southeast Asian gang known as the Viet Boys or the V Boys, and the tiny Oriental Crips, also known as TOC. He's going to talk about the criminal investigation that was dubbed the Orient Express and Operation Smoke Shop. This investigation involves wiretaps, robberies, burglaries, thefts, firearms, illegal gambling, bookmaking, murders, shootings, drug sales, and the shootout with San Diego police officers. Welcome once again, Doug, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, guys.
Hey, Doug.
Bienvenido.
So, Doug, let's get started. Since we already done introing you before, so people know. I mean, we heard about the academy and all that other stuff, you know,
Right.
because you've been on our show, I think, 3 times. So now, tell us, after returning from Afghanistan, where did you end up?
When I first got back from Afghanistan, I went back to the PD for a very short period of time, and one of my old partners, Mike Gallivan, he was one of our Team 4 members, and my partner actually in the gang unit as a detective. He had gone to Riverside DA's office, and so I went ahead and applied up there, and they accepted me. So I returned from Afghanistan in March of 2006, and I became a DAI up in Riverside on July 6th of 2006. So just a couple months.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty
Awesome.
fast.
Yep. So, Doug, we're going to start with the Asian gangs. Let's talk about who were the Viet Boys or the V Boys.
Okay, the V Boys, there was a couple of, I'm not going to say some of their names because I don't want to give them any more notorieties, or I don't want to, in case they've gotten out of the gangs, I don't want them, having their name pop up. But anyways, there was a couple of guys that came down from LA, from what they called the V, was the gang up there. And they were very astute at computer chip robberies. And when they came down to San Diego, they met up with a couple of kids in San Diego and kind of indoctrinated them into the gang and taught them how to do computer chip robberies. So these 2 young men in San Diego ended up starting the gang, the V Boys. And initially they did computer chip robberies all throughout San Diego. And they expanded upon their criminal enterprise. They started home intrusion robberies and gambling. They were real big in gambling establishments in like some of the local Vietnamese cafes. And then they got also involved in your typical street gang stuff, shootings. Some guys were selling dope and guns and stuff. But the V Boys never really, they didn't affiliate as a Crip or a Blood. They were just strictly the V Boys. And for the most part, they were Vietnamese males. And there were some women in the gang too, but it was mostly Vietnamese. There was a couple other folks in there, but it was predominantly a Vietnamese gang. And that's how it got started in San Diego.
Hey, Doug, so were they first generation, second generation Vietnam people from Vietnam?
They would have been second generation.
Okay.
Some of their parents would have been, or actually first generation. Their parents would have been immigrants from there. I believe most of them were born here in the States. There may have been a couple of them that were born in some of the refugee camps in Southeast Asia before coming over. But I believe most of them were born here, at least on the V Boys side. Yes, yeah.
So in other words, most of them didn't see the bad things. Probably their parents are the ones, or grandparents are the ones that experienced Vietnam during the Vietnam War.
Yes, most of them that. Some of them may have experienced some of the refugee camps throughout, Southeast Asia before they were able to immigrate to the States. But they would have been so young they wouldn't have known.
Doug, where was these guys operating from? Well, what area of San Diego were they mostly active at?
mostly East San Diego, what we would call City Heights today. They were all between like University Avenue, El Cajon Boulevard would be your two major arteries that ran east-west. And then I would say mostly maybe 805, the main highway artery running north-south to the east to La Mesa would be their main area. Although they were, if there was a Vietnamese community somewhere, there was a V-boy there, but that would be the main area. That seemed to be the big area. That would be the Mid-City Division area now. And it's interesting because Mid-City, a lot of immigrant groups go there. So the motto for that division is actually policing the world in the middle of the city. There's that many ethnic groups there. Yeah.
Hey,
Doug, were they up in Linda Vista too?
There may have been. I don't recall a lot of any V-boys really living up there. That would have been TOC.
TOC, right?
Yeah, that would have been TOC. Now there were Vietnamese males within TOC because there was, it was another one of those. It's a very racially mixed community. It's an old naval housing community,
right?
But when we had the big influx of immigrants, refugees coming in from Southeast Asia, that's where they kind of went to Linda Vista, some went up towards the Mira Mesa area,
Yeah.
and the others went out to the Mid-City area or City Heights. And that's where most immigrant groups went.
Hey, Doug, so this was not your first time dealing with Asian culture, right?
No. We when I was a detective in the gang unit, my partner and I handled Southeast Asian gangs. So,
Okay.
And back then, I want to say we were the only two detectives that really handled them throughout the entire county. So we got a lot of questions asked of us because most of them were actually based out of the city of San Diego. So we helped out a lot of other agencies with their Asian crime cases.
So
And-
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Was the initial contact with you when you're a detective kind of like a culture shock for you, trying to learn their culture and what was normal and what was not normal?
Well, my first contact actually was with the B-boys was more like when I was on the gang suppression team before I made a detective. But I started getting into the Asian gang subculture when I was in the Special Enforcement Division. But it wasn't really Vietnamese gangs then, it was Cambodian and Lao gangs, because that's what was mostly in the Mid-City Division at the time, and not the Vietnamese gangs. So I already kind of was getting into it. But when I went to the gang unit as a detective and was working with Mike on the Asian gangs is when I really got introduced to the Vietnamese gangs. I knew of them, but they weren't part of my purview when I was in uniform at the time.
Mm.
Go ahead, John.
So my question is we want to know who the tiny Oriental Crips or the TOC or TOC, wherever you guys call them back then.
Yeah, TOC. It's they're out of the Linda Vista area, and the interesting thing about Linda Vista is that it's pretty ethnically diverse. And early on, they had one gang up there called the Insane Family Gang, and that included blacks, Hispanic, and the Laotian, and a couple of the Vietnamese kids that lived up there, and the Hmong kids that lived up there. So it was called the Insane Family Gang. But the gang got so large that the ethnic groups kind of split apart. So the black members of the Insane Family Gang became known as the Linda Vista Crips. The Hispanic portion split off and they became known as LV-13. And then the Asians, they became the tiny Oriental Crips. So they all identified as Crips other than the Hispanic. They were more of a traditional Hispanic group. But the TOC came out about that time and they were mostly Lao kids and some Hmong, and there was a few Vietnamese kids in there. But that's how that TOC started. And they all kind of got along. They didn't have feuds within the groups up in Linda Vista because they were all started off at the same place. And they had their own little niche and things. But that's how TOC started, and they took on the mantra of a Crip, and that kind of stayed in line with the other Lao gangs that were in other parts of the city.
Hey, Doug.
We have a quick question from Dulce against the grain. LBC boys, are they TOC or is it a different gang from Linda Vista?
If I had, I'm not sure. I don't know how old that is, but if I look at it just as LBC boys, I would say that's the Linda Vista Crip boys.
Okay.
And that would be my guess. That's just an educated guess, because the group that identifies as Linda Vista Crips or LVC would be the black males that live up in that community.
Hey, Doug, since you brought up the Hmongs, and the first time I ever saw a big old Hmong community actually that were kind of dangerous to go by and drive by was in Fresno. Did these people have any connections with the Fresno Hmongs?
Oh, they believe it or not, these guys have family wherever there's a community of Hmong, Vietnamese, Cambodian. It doesn't matter what the ethnic group is within Southeast Asia. They have family members somewhere else in the United States. Fresno is a big spot for Cambodians, Long Beach, and then you got Lowell, Massachusetts, of all places, the big Cambodian place. And then in Houston, Texas, you got a pretty good sized Vietnamese community out in Houston, Texas, or out in that county out there because of the fishing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's one of the things that I learned quickly, and with my partner Mike at the time, was that these guys would pack up in their rickety old 1986, Acura Integra, and they would drive cross country to do a robbery and then drive home because they knew somebody there that would tell them about a place, and they would just go out there and do a robbery and then they drive home. So we would get information from informants, there was a jewelry store robbery that happened in, I was in Louisiana. It was in the Big Easy, right? They went out there and did a jewelry store robbery, but one of the guys actually cut himself on the broken glass, and we were able to help the New Orleans PD out with identifying that guy based on DNA stuff. And they were San Diego gang members that drove all the way out there. I mean, they would just do a speed run in 2 days, do the robbery and come back. So wherever there was a community, they were doing crimes there.
Hey, Doug, were these guys, were they using any meth or cocaine or anything like that?
Yeah, meth was a big problem. Weed obviously is a problem. Alcohol, they all drank. I don't think when I was working, cocaine wasn't a big issue, but meth was a huge issue. A lot of them were doing meth, and they were selling meth too. So cocaine wasn't a thing when I was working them.
Well, cocaine's a rich man's drug, so yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's different variants of meth too.
Right? Yeah. More bang for the buck, right? Too. They said $1,000 worth of coke or $1,000 worth of meth. They go with the meth. Hey, Doug. So, how did you start this case, the Operation Orient Express, and why that name?
Well, what happened was I got up to the DA's office in July of 2006, and then I got called into one of the deputy chief investigators' offices, and my supervisor called me in October of 2006, and they said, "Hey, we want you to go to this DOJ squad." And basically, I was supposed to be a liaison officer, help them with their cases and get them prepped for prosecution within the DA's office. And they asked me to go to this team, and it was a wiretap squad. I said, "Great, I'll go," not knowing it wasn't a task force. I was just being assigned there through the DA. Everybody there was a special agent with DOJ. Well, at that time, Mike Gallivan, my old partner to work Asian gangs with, he was already at the DA's office in Riverside, and he was attached to the gang suppression team down at the gang task force actually down in the Murrieta Temecula area on that work group. And he was telling me that a lot of the guys that we knew from when we were detectives and from when we were working Team 4 at San Diego PD, some of the big heads of the gangs were moving up to the Murrieta area and Temecula area of Riverside County. So he had done a couple of search warrants, and he was recovering dope and stuff from these guys. So me being attached to the DOJ, we had lots of money for informants and such. So, you guys know how local agencies are and county agencies are. There's only so much money. But when you're attached to a state agency, it's like almost limitless. It's crazy. So we hooked up with a couple of our old CIs from San Diego PD, re-signed them up to me at the DOJ, and we started working these cases. And what they did is they ended up taking us back to San Diego. So the main guys had moved up north, but they were still running operations of what was happening down south. Mm. So we learned that they were involved in a lot of ecstasy at the time. And the word is that they were actually getting the chemicals being brought in from China, except back then it wasn't coming up through Mexico. It was coming down through the I-5 corridor from Canada, because it was really easy for them to get into Canada. And you come across the Canadian border, it's not the same checkpoints as they have down on the Mexican border. So they're coming down the I-5 corridor with their chemicals, and they're supposed to be making the ecstasy in Southern California. And that's how we got the name Orient Express. It wasn't Express, it was Express. So they were making their own stuff. And I came up with that name. At the DOJ, everybody wants a fancy name on their cases. So at first it was kind of looked upon like, we can't really do that because, there's a whole thing about the Orient Express. And I says, well, it's Express, not Express like the train. But that was basically our logo. And it got through, and that's how it got its name, because that was initially how we got started. And we were making buys of boats, which was 1,000 pills of ecstasy from some of these guys down to San Diego.
What year was this, Doug?
This would be in 2006 and 2007. At the end of 2006 and the beginning of 2007. But the total investigation lasted almost 2 years between Smoke Shop and Orient Express. Smoke Shop was not a wire case. It was just a case that we started in order to build up a probable cause to go up on a wire case. So for those who have never done a wire cases, in order to listen, because the ultimate invasion of privacy is listening to other people's phone calls. So in order to get to that point, you pretty much have to exhaust all other investigative means that you can in order to achieve what you want to achieve. So we started Smoke Shop. There was a tobacco shop, a smoke shop, that was doing a lot of criminal activity involving our guys. And so we were helping the detectives at the Mid-City Division of San Diego PD with their cases based on our informants that were coming out of that smoke shop. So we were able to counsel some jewelry store robberies, burglary series, dope, firearms, gambling houses, all kinds of stuff coming out of that smoke shop. Well, that ultimately came to an end when the PD, because for those who are aware, you try to wall cases off. You try to build a wall so it doesn't come back to your informants or come back to you. We didn't want the cases coming back to Mike and I, because if they would have, you got to understand that Mike and I, we became very well known within the gang sets of the Asian gang sets in San Diego. They basically knew we were not working in San Diego anymore. So if we would have come up, or if we would have popped up, or names would have popped up, then we weren't sure if we could get going on our investigation. So we walled it off to San Diego PD to keep us out of it. And we did all the paperwork, and along with the PD officers, but we walled it to them so that we could shield ourselves from the investigation. Once that was done, then I was able to build a probable cause in order to get the wiretap order to start listening to phone calls of our main suspects. And that's how it all started.
Hey, Doug, how long did you guys last on your wiretap?
Well, I ended up with 5 total wires. So each wiretap order in the state of California, and these are state wiretaps, not federal wiretaps.
Oh.
So it's in the state of California, our wiretaps, you get a 30-day order. So they can last for 30 days. You can re-up them, but you have to continue to write more probable cause to keep that wire going. So our first wire only lasted like 3 weeks, and we had some things go down that I had to shut that wire down because we had a major investigation based on that wire that I had to do, and that my team had to do. And so we shut it down. We dealt with that. We kept up with the basic investigation so that we could go back up on a wire. So it was about, I want to say, 2 months later. So we went up in November of 2007, I believe, on our first wire, and we were shut down, before Christmas. And then I didn't go back up again, I believe, until February of 2008. And then I continued on with 4 more orders. So another, 120 days for the rest of the investigation to be completed. And then all the follow-up after that, and the takedowns and the search warrants and the arrest warrants to follow after that. So there's
Go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
So there was a total of 5 wiretap orders. The first 30-day one only lasted 3 weeks. The following 4 lasted the entire time.
Hey Doug, and one of the things too that I noticed, and then we can divulge this, is wire cases are very expensive.
Yes.
On your support staff, that's actually, it's either whoever's actually doing the actual listening. People don't understand how it can get expensive. It can get really expensive.
They are very expensive, and the idea behind this team that the state did was we were to assist. So my team was responsible for San Diego County, Imperial County, Riverside County, and San Bernardino County. Those were the counties that my team was responsible for. So the idea was that we would go to the smaller agencies that didn't have that kind of a budget to help them with their gang cases. It just so happened that the first one I did was San Diego. But yeah, I think the first 30-day order we did, we spent $70,000 just on the wire because, the phone companies charge you. It doesn't matter. It's a court order. They want their money. So they charge you because there's work on their end that they're feeding to us. They charge you. And then because we were dealing with Vietnamese and Lao mainly, we had to hire interpreters. So we had to hire interpreters to actually listen to the lines because I don't speak Vietnamese. I don't speak Lao. And no one else on the teams did. If it was a Spanish-speaking wire, we would have been okay because we had Spanish-speaking investigators, special agents. But we didn't have any Vietnamese or Lao. So we had to hire these translators. And the other thing is that you have to have a sworn officer in the wire room where the phone lines are coming in all the time. Right. So you're paying a cop to be in that wire room 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Plus you got your surveillance teams, you're out there doing stuff. And I never worked so many hours, and I worked a lot of hours at San Diego PD, believe me. But that wire case was just tremendous because I would work my shift, my 10-hour shift during the day. And then I would work 6 to 8 hours again in the wire room at the end of my shift. And then I'd go home and I'd start all over. And then on my days off, I would do an 8-hour shift, and all the other guys would do an 8-hour shift. So, and you're talking 2 years. That's a lot of hours, and that's our overtime. We're paying all the phone companies. So they're very expensive, very expensive.
Hey Doug, on your first wiretap, how many lines were you guys up on?
My first line, we were up on 3 lines. We identified 3 people that we're up on lines for. And Benny, you've worked wires before, so you know how that goes. As soon as you start getting all this criminal information from other phone lines, as you progress through your wiretap, you're adding more lines. Right. And that's when they really start getting expensive. And I think by the end of it, we were up on, I think, 10 lines towards the end of the wire. But we initially started with 3.
Hey, guys, we're going to run out of time. So, Sean, go ahead. Go to number 7.
Okay, hey, Doug, TOC and the V Boys, are they rivals?
Normally, yes, and that's what was confusing about this case initially for us, because at this point, these guys had gotten to such a higher level in criminal enterprises that the gang stuff, the street stuff didn't even matter anymore. It was all about making money. It's how much money can we make and generate. So they worked together, and they controlled a pretty large area of San Diego County and the southern part of Riverside County. So it just became a money-making machine, although they were still having their street gang issues in San Diego with the lower guys, but these guys were at a different level. So they worked together, and they were just making bank.
Hey, tell us about within 3 weeks of the initial wiretap order, the case was suspended.
Yeah, so what happened on that is we were out working it. We had made a lot of dope buys, and we were doing a lot of surveillance down in San Diego County. Well, I was the only one on my team that was familiar with San Diego. The rest of the guys were all from Riverside and San Bernardino, so they weren't familiar with the area in San Diego. So we've been working them, and we've been taking off dope and stuff, and we were actually working with San Diego PD gang unit at the time. I would brief the lieutenant, who was Andy Mills at the time, and I would brief the Asian gang team on stuff because we wanted to make sure we were sharing information. And the lieutenant, Andy Mills, actually assigned a GST team to us so that we would have uniform presence when we needed traffic stops done and all that kind of stuff. So we worked really close with San Diego PD on that. So what had happened is we got information of they were going to do a rip. There was a Mexican dealer in East San Diego, and they were and he was selling a lot of meth, and he had direct connections with the cartels. And the information we got, we actually shared with DEA because they were working those cases. So we didn't want to step on their toes. They gave us the okay to work this side, and they continued to work on their stuff. But they were going to do a rip, and it sounded like it was going to be pretty violent. So we actually put up a surveillance team out on the Mexican dealer just to keep him safe, and we put a surveillance team on our main target. And this kid had never, ever been contacted by the police, not even a parking ticket, never. But our CIs had told us that he's one of the main guys. And he's the guy that we were making the boat buys from, the boats of ecstasy from.
Damn.
So the team was out surveilling him, and he was also, he and his father owned a landscaping business. They'd been following him from job site to job site. They came home back to East San Diego, and the team followed him to several different locations. And ultimately, he was going to an apartment complex that we had bedded him down to before. We knew it was a friendly place. The problem is we didn't know who his companion was. We had no idea, and nothing was coming on the lines that we could tell who it was. There was some chatter on the lines of a woman had called our guy saying, hey, if you've got so-and-so with you, don't bring him over because I don't want any issues at the house. And he's like, yeah, don't worry about it. Well, it didn't clue into the guys listening to the wire room. So what had happened was that they got to the house, the surveillance team sat up around the apartment complex, and they thought they were going to bed him down for the night. Well, our main guy never got out of his vehicle, but his passenger did. His passenger went up to the apartment complex, and when he went to the apartment complex, he ended up booting in the door, and he shot 6 people in that apartment complex, in that apartment. It turned out that was his ex-wife's apartment, and he was pissed off because she was having some guests over at the house, and they'd had some issues in the past. So he was going to go kill everybody. He ended up killing one guy in that place, but he shot all 6 people inside. Well, the surveillance teams, they hear the shots go out, and they go running in there. And of course, it's the only complex in the entire community where the security gates actually work. They're actually locked. And so the surveillance teams had to jump. In the meantime, the shooting suspect runs out in the alleyway, gets to get back in the vehicle with the main suspect. Well, the DOJ surveillance team comes in, and they get into a big shootout with the suspect. The suspect ends up shooting one of the DOJ agents, And it was he got shot in the abdomen. And it was just below his bulletproof vest. He was okay, but now we have an officer down, and the shootouts continuing. This guy was loaded for bear. He had a 45, and he had multiple magazines that he had preloaded. So he'd already dumped 2 magazines in the apartment. Now he's dumping another magazine in the alleyway against the DOJ guys. Foot pursuits catch on. The GST guys from San Diego PD are there. They pursue him. And this was at basically 35th and El Cajon Boulevard, if anybody from San Diego is familiar with that area. Just a few blocks to the west is Interstate 805. Yeah. This guy's on foot. He runs down onto the interstate. So now the GST guys, there's guys in cars, there's guys on foot, patrols coming. I mean, it's a mess, right? So they're calling 1199 and officer down. Fortunately, we had planned for a lot of stuff, so we had access to the PD radios, so we were able to put it out. And of course, we had PD officers with us with the GST guys, and then, so there wasn't a communication issue on the radios. But the thing is that the division did not know what we were doing. So there was a lot of confusion going on. So, anyways, they chased the guy down on the highway. And the patrol guys were able to get the highway stopped so that there was no traffic coming north and south while the guy's running, because he's just shooting it out with the cops as he's running down the highway. A couple of patrol units try to squish him in the center jersey wall, and he would hop over. So they were crashing their cars they were basically trying to kill him by running him over, but they couldn't do it. But ultimately, what happened was there was an officer who was a PRT officer, who was at that time he was a rep for H&K Rifles, and he heard the call come out, and he went to an overpass and pulled out his rifle, and I had the video of it because it was all evidence. But Abel's overhead, the helicopter's overhead, filming it all and putting out the information. But you can see that SWAT officer get out of his car, and he stands on the overpass. And he ends up shooting and killing the guy as he's running across the freeway. It was a hell of a shot because he's elevated, and it's probably a good 75-yard shot, and the guy's running. At the same time, there's a canine officer who engages the guy in a shooting. He releases his dog. Well, the dog hits this guy at the same time in the throat, and the dog is just shaking him. And you can see it on the video. He's just violently shaking the guy. No one knew that the SWAT officer had already fired a shot because it happened almost simultaneously. The canine officer, when we interviewed him, said that he goes, "I thought my dog broke his neck until I got up there to secure the suspect because the gun was now off to the side." And he realized that the guy was he was riddled with bullets, but then he saw a headshot, and he realized, oh, someone shot him from the head. And then if you listen back to the radio, very calmly, you can hear that SWAT officer saying, I don't remember what his unit number was, but he basically puts out his unit number, and he says shot away, and he said suspect down. But because of all the chatter on the radio and the screaming and the yelling and the dispatcher everybody's talking over everybody, you really have to kind of get it down there. But it happened right when that dog hit him. And it was a violent shake. But the guy, when they did the autopsy on him, he'd been hit like 13 times. So as he's engaging officers are also hitting him, but he's not going down. It's because he was on a meth high.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
When they were doing their surveillance, he had stopped by a meth house and he'd gotten loaded. And then he went to another house where he got the gun. And then he went over and did the shooting. Now, the kicker on this whole thing is I wasn't there. I was the case agent, and I wasn't there. I was on a flight back home from Florida. I had gone to one of the guys I served with in Afghanistan. On my earlier show, I talked about how I was working with this lieutenant commander from the Navy on an operation out there. And he retired, and he invited me back to his retirement. So when I landed, all this was already done. So when I landed, I turned on my pager and my phone, and it was just going crazy because they knew I was coming home that night. And that's how I went out to do the briefing, because the agent in the wire room can't leave the wire room. You got to be there. Well, all the other agents had been involved in the shooting. So they're not going to be doing any briefing. They're waiting for all the reps and everybody else to show up. The only guy that could do the briefing was me. So I'm hauling ass from the free, you know, and at that time we were able to park at, you guys can remember, you could park your G rides at Harbor PD get off the airport. So I went over there, grabbed my car, and I hauled ass out to East San Diego to go to the homicide briefing. And it was a freaking mess. The sad part about it is, and I use this case to debrief, that I used to teach a class at a community college in San Diego called Intelligence-Based Policing and Investigations. And I used to use this case as a breakdown, as experienced as I was doing gang cases and all that kind of stuff. The breakdown was I wasn't there. I was the only guy who knew those locations. If I was on that surveillance, the house that they went to get high at, I knew was a smoking den, because it'd been a smoking den since I was in Wecan in the late 80s. The house that they went to pick up the gun, I knew, because that was a guy that Mike Gallup and I had arrested years earlier that was currently on parole for selling guns to gang members. And as soon as that call came in regarding about, hey, don't bring so-and-so over to the house, I probably would have put it together. And at that point, would have had GST make a wall stop, and we would have recovered the gun then, and maybe the homicide wouldn't have occurred. So it was like, it wasn't like anybody's fault. It was just circumstances. And that was when we put the case down, because now what happened was we had one guy in custody, our main guy, for homicide. Well, he was responsible for 2, really, and the rest of the shootings, because he drove the guy everywhere. He knew what was going to happen. Well, we were able to prove that later on, but you know, we had to put that case together so he could be prosecuted for the homicide of his cohort that the police killed, and then for the homicide within the apartment complex where he knew the people were there having a party. That's when we had to put the case down. But ended up, San Diego PD had to call out 2 homicide teams to handle that, because we had the 2 scenes. We had one at the apartment complex and then one on the freeway with the officer involved shooting. So there's 2 teams that came out. And I want to, if I remember correctly, this was on a Friday night or a Saturday night. Homicide was presenting the case to the DA's office the following Monday, because in California, you know, you got 48 hours to present your case, or you got to let the guys out of jail. So for the arraignments. So homicide went down and presented the case Monday morning. I was invited to go down with my partner, who was the agent listening in the wire room at the time, to give the briefing to the DA's office on the case. Well, we were still generating all the reports. I mean, that was the problem, is that we were trying to put the timeline together, the surveillance reports, everything together. And the DA's office basically says, you know, we don't have anything on this guy other than a conspiracy to do a robbery. And that's what we were surveilling him for, originally for. So I told the DA's office our background on it. I said, we still don't have enough. And I says, well, I bet we can get the guy to cop out. So I went back to homicide and talked to the original detective that did the interview, and he and I both went down to jail. He hadn't been assigned an attorney yet. He had waived his Miranda when he initially talked to homicide. So we Mirandized him in jail and re-interviewed him. Well, I let the detective from homicide, San Diego homicide, do the initial investigation. I just sat there. And, you know, part of it is I had a big notebook with a bunch of papers in it. A lot of it was just fluff. There wasn't anything in it because everything was in my head, because we hadn't generated all the reports yet. So as he was getting details about his culpability in the shooting, I would interject things because I knew what was going on because of the wire. So ultimately at the end, I told him, I says, look, I've been listening to your phone calls for, you know, the past 3 weeks, and I know A, B, and C, and I know this house does this and this house does that. So why don't you tell us what really happened and quit lying to us? And then he just copped out. He says, yeah, I took him over to get high because he knew he didn't have the gumption to do it on his own. And then I took him over to this house to get the gun and the ammunition. And then he admitted that he had got the phone calls from his companion's ex-wife saying, "Hey, don't bring him to the house because I've got friends over." So we were able to put it all together. And then I called up the DA that evening and says, "Hey, look, we've got it all. I've got it on tape on the interview. I'll work on the reports all night. I'll get to you first thing in the morning," because he was being arraigned the following day. And then the chief of the gang unit of the prosecution unit said, "Yeah, we'll go ahead and file the murder charges on him." And they did. They filed the 2 murder charges. We went to the preliminary hearing. He was bound over for all the things that we had, and ultimately he pled guilty. Basically, what happened was after the prelim, the judge told the DA and told the defense attorneys, like, "Look, this guy has no criminal history at all. No one knew who he was until we started this case." He goes, "You need to get together and you need to come with a deal." And the deal was he pled guilty to the conspiracy to commit robbery, armed robbery, and then he pled guilty to manslaughter because he wasn't an actual shooter. So he ended up getting 15 years. 15 years to life was what he pled out to. So we never went to trial on the case, but that was the cause. I mean, we probably worked on that case, and then I became the lead investigator for the homicide. They're like, "Well, I'm working out of Riverside County on this gang team, and so it was a lot of man hours, but it worked out fine. And we were done with that case by February or March, I believe, and then we were off again, rocking and rolling with 4 more wires on the other guys that were involved in this case.
So you can say that the investigation continued right after this case.
Yeah, I had talked to the supervisors at DOJ and says, "Look, for us to do this wire justice and for me to be able to work on this homicide thing," I said, "there's no way we can do both." And they agreed. And I got to say that the senior SAC that I worked with for DOJ out of Riverside County was a really good guy. And he called up because it was a big case. I mean, it made the news. So DOJ loved it because they were promoting this program to all these agencies. So he talked to the chiefs up in Sacramento and says, "Look, our investigators are saying we need to concentrate on this homicide first, and they're confident we can get back up on these lines." And to be honest with you, and this was through the Bureau of Narcotic Enforcement with DOJ, and they all agreed. They said, "Yep, that sounds like the best plan. Just keep us abreast of what's going on," because they're still paying all the money. I mean, all this money is still being thrown out for these cases. So it turned out well in the end. And then we were able to continue with the case afterwards and put an end to it. I want to say it was September of 2008 is when the whole case went down.
Go ahead,
Wow.
Benny. The last question.
So, Doug, what were the ultimate results of the investigation? I mean, was it local time, state time? Did the feds get involved? Was there federal time?
Yeah, there was some federal stuff involved, and we handed that off because there were some loose. So ultimately, at the end, we ended up arresting 40 guys from these gangs, and these were some of the main guys. So we felt good about that. They were some of the shot callers, but we got it for weapons violations. We were getting banned firearms, and California bans everything, so that's not such a big thing. But we were getting banned firearms. We actually got involved in an international Indian gaming fraud, where they were going between the United States and Canada to the Native American casinos, and they were setting up their own dealers in those places, and they were just ripping them off of tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the Secret Service was working that investigation. So we were able to work with the Secret Service on that. One guy was making passports. In his backyard in his shed in his backyard, he had put up a little lab where he was making passports and ID cards for guys to get in the country illegally. We got that, and we ended up turning that over to INS. And there was a couple other federal cases, firearms cases and dope cases. One case was interesting. We identified a guy, and we were going to take him off on my sweep, but we were asked not to because he was wanted by Interpol. they were investigating him because he was sending precursors for ecstasy. He was getting it, like I said, from China to Canada, and they were coming down the I-5 corridor. But he was sending it to Denmark, which in Denmark back then was the big ecstasy place. I mean, they made it all over for Europe and out of Denmark. So they asked us to hold off on that case. So we just turned that over to the DEA so that they could work with Interpol on that. But other than that, we did it for, we ended up doing it for, dope. Dope's always a good one to get it for. There was an auto theft fraud. What they were doing is they were stealing cars and then they were stripping them. And they would leave it on the side of the road, but they wouldn't damage the cars. They would surgically strip these cars. Well, they'd be stripped down so far that insurance companies would just, it's a loss. So they'd put these cars up for auction. Then these guys would buy the car, right, at auction, put all their fucking parts back on it, and they got a brand new car for nothing. Except in California, it's got a salvage title. So what they would do is they would transfer the title to Georgia, because Georgia doesn't recognize, at that time, Georgia didn't recognize salvage titles. They would transfer it to Georgia on paper. The car never went there. They had a buddy who lived there. They would just register these cars under his name. They get a clean title out of Georgia. Then they would sell the cars with a clean title, and they were making bank on these cars. They did it with motorcycles and cars. So we were able to find that out. We solved a bunch of robberies, jewelry store robbery. There was one where there was $90,000 worth of jewels taken. We were able to recover all the jewelry. So there was a lot. I mean, these guys were involved in so much, it just got overwhelming. And it got to a point on the wires was like, we can keep going or we can take them off, because they're just going to continue to, at some point, you got to cut the head off the snake, because they're just doing more crimes. We know they're doing more crimes, and you don't want them to, commit a robbery, or you don't want them killing somebody. So it's like, okay, we've got enough on these guys. We just got to shut this down, take them off the streets, because it's getting to the point now where it's getting too crazy, and we can't afford to let somebody get hurt because I want to make a dope case. It doesn't make any sense. So that's when we ended up coming together, and I says, we got to shut this down. We've got our objectives, we've got everything in order, and then I got the search warrants for all their homes. We hit their homes, got more evidence of their criminal activity at their homes. And some of them, we wrapped up some of their girlfriends, their wives got involved. And so we ended up taking off quite a few guys.
Hey Doug, you remind me when I was on the board of our Imperial County Narcotics Task Force. I mean, these guys were going to these investigations that just kept on spinning off. Yeah. Where we as a board went there, we had to just say, hey, dude, that's it. We're giving you 30 days to shut it down. I mean, you guys, it keeps on spinning off to another case. I mean, and there's crime happening 24/7. So you guys can be there forever.
Yeah.
I mean, and never stop.
It's like the infinity sign, right?
Yeah.
It never ends. And I mean, how much dope do you need to have a good prosecutable case? How many robberies does a guy have to do before you can charge him for robberies? At some point, you just got to cut it off, because it's going to get too dangerous.
For us, it was good until the state got involved and started taking our asset forfeiture money. Before, when we were able to pawn it off to the feds, and we would get, the deal that we had at the time was a certain percentage went to the initiation agency, and everybody got a good piece of the pie. So now you got the state coming in and saying, oh, it's coming through us now, and it's no longer, you can't pawn it off into the feds as easy as before. Right. Now we get a huge chunk out of it, and they don't do no work. I mean, all the work is done by us, the locals.
Yeah. So, then what was nice, well, I think one of the reasons the DA's office put me on there, because they saw the opportunity to get assets.
Yep.
So what the state seized, we were able to get a piece of that. And you know what? On the narcotics side, because there was another team called Inca, and they were the hyper team. They were doing all the narcotic stuff, right? But on the gang side, really, what assets you're going to get? That 1967, Chevy Impala is not worth that much.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say, as much as we like those cars, we're not seizing that car. It's just not going to happen. They don't have real property. You might get some dope. You might get lucky and get cash.
But it's not that much, anyways. I mean,
not that much.
But by the time everybody gets a piece of the pie, you're getting $5,000.
Yeah, and it's not equaling what you're paying out.
Nope,
on
it
those
never
cases. It never equals out
unless you're dealing with majors or something like that.
Right.
Then at that point,
and this was not a majors team;
Yeah.
it was a street gang team. So
Yeah.
you know, we were spending a lot more money.
We have one last question. This will be the last question of the night. Chris Kilby, who was part of your team, is asking about the Amanda Giki case. Can you talk briefly about it?
Yeah, Amanda Giki was a young girl. She was kidnapped and she was sexually assaulted and she was murdered. And this was happened in gosh, I had to have been in the late 80s. I was still in uniform. I think my partner Gallivan was in uniform at the time. I was in a specialized team, and I think he was at Central Division, or he may have even been a detective by then. But anyways, big case in San Diego. You know, this girl's missing. She's been missing for a long time, and then they found her body wrapped up in a sheet in a canyon near Balboa Park in the Golden Hill area. So the homicide case is going and working, and it had been cold for many, many years. And there were some details about the case that weren't put out, like a lot of times that aren't put out in the press. Just in case you get a suspect, you want them to tell you details that only the suspects would know. So Mike and I, we were detectives now in the gang unit together, and we worked a home intrusion robbery series with some V-boys. And we had flipped a couple of the people within the V-boys about these cases. And they were doing rapes while doing robberies. They were wanted. They did a multitude of robberies throughout the county of San Diego. So to make that part short, we were able to take these guys into custody, and we told the two people that flipped, that were working with us now, said, you know, you're going to get arrested, you're going to have to go to jail, and the DA was on board with this, and they would be given considerations. So when we booked them, this one gentleman, we booked him, and we told him, you know, after tomorrow, you're going to get an attorney, you're going to be arraigned, and we can't talk to you without the attorney present. But if you come across anything, if you think of something that you think might help you with the cases, or you call us, let us know. So the jail was notified. The deputies were really good in the jail about that kind of stuff. He didn't call us directly. He called his brother. His brother called Mike, and he says, hey, you need to go down and see my brother. He says he's got something about a case that he thinks you need to talk to you about. So we went down and interviewed him. And it was funny because he told us, he goes, it's a really old case. And I think the statute of limitations is over, and he proceeded to tell us about one of his classmates when he was in middle school and high school. They had kidnapped a young girl and sexually assaulted her and killed her. Well, it was the Amanda Giki case. And Mike and I, when we're doing the interview, we're like, oh crap, that's the Amanda Giki case. Because he talked about a bicycle, he talked about the bed sheets, he talked about all that stuff. That either one, he did it, right? Because he had details that nobody else had, or the suspect actually told him about. Well, the suspect was 16 years old when he did the case, and he was half Korean. So he's an Asian kid. Well, the FBI had come in before with the homicide team, and obviously, it was a pedophile thing that they were looking at, and the profiling group came in and said that's a middle-aged white male. Well, it was a 16-year-old Korean kid. Wow. So we went back and we briefed homicide, and initially the homicide team that was handling the case kind of blew us off, and then another sergeant had overheard us talking, who was actually on the initial case, talked to us and told us the same thing. He goes, man, that guy's details, either he's our suspect or the suspect confessed. Well, within a few days, they got the guy into custody, and he ended up confessing to the cases. And sure shit, he was a 16-year-old Korean kid who did that homicide. And
was he a gang member?
No, he was just a kid. But he and our informant, when they were young, they were friends in school, and he had called the kid over. The suspect had called our informant to his house and says, "Hey, I want to show you something." And he told him about what he did. And he initially had put the young girl, after he killed her, in the dumpster in the back of the apartment complex. He goes, "You look in there, that's where she is." Our informant was so afraid. He goes, I didn't want any. He was afraid of the bad juju, if he saw a dead body.
Mhm.
So because I didn't even want to look, because I believed him because he was so adamant. Why would he tell me there was a body in the dumpster and for me to look at it if there wasn't one there? But we asked him afterwards, we're like, why didn't you tell somebody about this? And culturally, if you understand the culture, at least of that generation of immigrant, they don't necessarily freely give you information. You have to ask. If you ask, they'll tell you. But they're not just going to walk up to you and say, oh, by the way, I know this is what's going on over here. So Mike and I learned early was like, ask the questions. If you ask, they'll talk. If you don't ask the questions, they're not going to freely give you the information.
And outstanding work, man. And you know what? Not too many people. I didn't know this story.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you and Mike Gallivan were involved. Thank you, Chris, for asking this question. Man, outstanding. But Doug, with that said, hey, brother, thank you very much. But before we let you go, I know you're coming back, and I think Benny is going to hopefully give us the date that you're coming back. But you're also a part now. You're a co-host of our Wednesday show, Ash Wednesday. And tomorrow, brother, we're going to give you a formal welcome. But we look forward to having you every Wednesday at 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. While Benny's looking that up, Chalo, any last words for Big Doug?
Doug, hey, thanks a lot, man, and I can't wait to have you on our Throwback Thursday show that we're going to start probably in about a month. And I'm just kidding, David. Hey, thanks, bro. You know, they're interesting stories, bro. Interesting stories. I can just imagine all the fun you had working those cases.
Oh, yeah, they were a lot of fun.
Big Sean? Oh, go ahead, Doug.
I was just saying a lot of work, but they were a lot of fun.
Yeah. A lot of overtime.
Right.
Yeah. You know what? And forget about the overtime. It took a lot of yourself, man.
So,
I mean, just giving those 2 years, I mean, a lot of family time.
A lot of family time.
And that's what's more important, the family time. You
know,
can't get that back, you know?
The family members of cops in general put up with a lot of crap.
Exactly.
yeah.
You know, time off, going to court, you know, oh, I can't go on vacation because I got this freaking subpoena they won't let me out of. I mean, families put up with a lot. They really do.
And a defense attorney is not going to want to give up that date, especially knowing if you're going on vacation.
Yeah.
He's hoping you go on vacation.
Yeah.
They want to mess with you as much as they can.
Yeah. Hey, so you put about 8,000 hours in those 2 years, huh? That you were there.
Oh man, you know what? The problem is like, you know, all of them went to taxes.
Yeah, exactly.
You were looking at a Rolex and ended up with a Casio, right? Yeah.
Big Sean, last words?
No, just a great show, Doug. Good seeing you again, bro.
Good seeing you guys.
And Benny, do we have a date so people can start marking down their calendar?
We got Doug coming over May 9th. It's a Thursday show. We're going to be doing the Riverside gangs, city of Riverside, county Riverside, all the Hammett gangs, all the street gangs. And we haven't set up a date yet for the Vagos. We got to do a special on the Vagos.
Yeah.
And Doug's wife, Kim's, coming on June 4th. And she's going to be talking about a homicide case.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And Doug, since you're the new co-host on Ash Wednesday, tell us about tomorrow's show with Warden Daniel Vasquez.
Yeah, tomorrow's going to be Warden Daniel Vasquez. And he was in San Quentin, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes. San Quentin. And we did a little promo on Sunday, Dave and I did. But he was the warden that was involved in the execution of Robert Alton Harris. Yeah, Robert Alton Harris, who was a suspect in the killing of the son of a San Diego PD detective. Very interesting case. Look at the promo. We kind of go into a little more, but the interesting part with Warden Vasquez is that he was the first warden to commit an execution at San Quentin in 25 years. There hadn't been an execution committed until the execution of Harris. So he's going to be talking about that and some of his. And I think he did four total days?
4 executions in 10 years.
In 10 years.
84 to 94.
Yeah, and it was gas chamber stuff. So
yes.
There's some interesting stuff that went on that. So he's going to share his experiences on that. That should be really interesting.
This guy was a piece of shit, that guy.
Oh, yes, he was.
Right.
And you know what? If you get a chance.
He's a piece of shit.
Without a doubt. If you get a chance, watch the promo that we did on Sunday night. Doug did a great job breaking down the case. And you know what? I was telling Doug before he came on, I was reading the transcripts of the case. My God, you're absolutely right. That guy deserved to die then and 10 times more.
Yeah.
What a piece of shit. You're absolutely right. With that said, Doug, we can't wait to see you tomorrow, brother. Have your drink ready. We'll see you at 5 o'clock. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow, brother, and welcome to Ash Wednesday.
Thanks, gentlemen. We'll see you later.
Thank you, brother. Yeah. Wow. That's pretty heavy, huh?
Mm.
Yep.
This case, man. Yeah. That is heavy. Yeah. Great episode. Benny, tell us about who do we have coming next week?
Well, you were going to bring it up, remember?
Oh, yes. You know what? We don't have a show. So, Chalo, guess what? You could go have your tacos and go have a wonderful time. No show next Tuesday.
Hey, Taco Tuesday.
Yes. Taco Tuesday. Go to Taco Tuesday. Yes. Guys, no show next week. I'm going to be myself and Benny. We're going to be at a conference in Campbell, California. We're going to be teaching a class on our book, When the Music Stops, the Pain Begins, for police officers on PTSD and police officer suicides. So keep us in your prayers that our words may touch a police officer that is currently active or retired. They'll be at that seminar, that God may touch them and bless their family. It's going to be a great episode. So next week, no show Ash Wednesday and no show on the Gray Line.
Hey, David, are you guys going to thumb on Louise it up like last time, or are you guys are going to
No. This time, you know what? We're going to hang out with the fellows, smoke cigars, have a couple of shots of tequila. We're not even going to come on the air, man. We're going to have a wonderful time with all the cops. Yeah, I'm really looking forward. Last year we went, Benny and I, we were talking to cops from all over California. And I'll tell you, man, my 4 days went by like literally one day. It's a blessing to be among our men and women in blue. It was really good. Yeah.
Awesome.
Good.
Benny, anything that I forgot?
Yeah, we're going to be returning now on May 7th. We're coming back May 7th, and Chalo's going to have a special guest.
Yeah, so I'll send you the questions and pictures hopefully this week. That will be before you guys take off, Benny. I'll send them to you.
Perfect.
And it's a family of boxers, right?
Yeah. It's the young ladies, so Ceguera ladies, young ladies that are boxers. One of them stopped boxing, but the other one's Liz is still doing it.
Well, you know what, Chalo? Maybe just for that episode, you could do a what is it called? GoFundMe or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And then maybe just for that episode, people that are watching could donate some money, and I'll donate some money. I know Benny will. All of us will donate $100 each or whatever for this family. Maybe just for that episode, because I know they need money. Yeah. So keep that in the back of your mind.
All right. Órale, pues.
Okay.
All right, you guys have a safe trip, man.
Hey, gracias. With that said, Benny, your last words. You got Hector White, another legend.
Every day the police must see the ugliness of the world. Stay strong and seek help if you need help. We know that you can't unsee what we see or witness on the job. So just stay healthy.
Chalo.
And you know what? I just saw one of my buddies show up, Kenneth Caldera, LAPD retired, went out and worked for Customs Border Protection, but he was a police officer reserve with the state of Calexico. He's retired now. He's talk about integrity. This man's got integrity. Maybe we'll bring him on the show one of these days.
Yeah,
he's got a lot of experience, also life experience. He's an avid cyclist. He likes to go out there and he's a tour de la manure here in the valley type of stuff. That's what they call it. They used to have a race and they call it Tour de Manure because of the cows and everything here, but they actually have cyclists that go out there. Anyways, integrity means everything, guys. Like always, some of you might not think so that I have integrity, but I have a lot of integrity. Thanks.
I don't know anybody doesn't think you have integrity, especially when you came out on our Ash Wednesday. We had so many people, positive comments, and no, dude, I don't know where you're getting that. You have a lot of integrity. Yeah. But going back real quick to your camarada, have him give Benny his phone number, have him schedule him. We'll have him on our show. I think it'll be a blessing.
Look at his last comment that he put up there.
I saw that.
I didn't want to say that, but yeah.
Yeah. Big Sean.
Just for all those men and women in law enforcement and in emergency services, just look what's going on at our college campuses. It's going to shit. And those of you who remember Occupy. And if those of you that worked Occupy demonstrations or any demonstrations, just remember what you handled there and see what they're doing now. It's the same thing. So it's, just watch your back and be safe, and, don't go into something that you're not ready to take care of.
And don't forget, live a purpose-driven life. Literally, keep that in mind. We're not just saying this, we believe it. Live every day like it's your last day on earth. Every moment, every second, every breath you take advantage of it. And you keep this in mind also. You know what? Whether you're working or you're retired, you don't stop being a sheepdog. Keep giving. I'm a firm believer, and my life is testament that the more you give, the more you receive. I'm telling you, donate your time. If you're bored at home, you're drinking too much, you don't know what to do with your life, volunteer at your church security, volunteer at hospice, volunteer at a hospital, volunteer at a boys and girls club. Do something with your life, but don't just stay home doing nothing, complaining, worrying about the end of the world, worrying about politics. Live every day like it's your last, and live a purpose-driven life. With that said, God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow on Ash Wednesday. If not, we'll see you in 2 weeks. God bless you.